everyone. Today is my good pleasure to be chatting with Dr. ALBINE BIZIMANA. She is the clinical psychologist at Dayton Veterans Medical Center in the United States of America. And she also happens to be my sister. Yay! We just want to chat a little bit about her journey, where she started, and where she is right now. It's not every day when you see somebody who has been a refugee through different countries to end up where she is right now. And obviously we can spend a lot of time talking about so many things because people's lives are multifaceted, but we are only going to focus on her career trajectory, and hopefully somebody can be inspired. Dr. BIZIMANA, welcome, and thank you for responding to the call.
Thank you for having me.
How is the little baby? I know you just had your second baby and looks like you're doing great.
Yeah, we're doing great, but you know, it's a moment by moment experience. We are never bored around here.
It feels like yesterday. I just remember you as this little baby sister that I used to pick up, carry around, take to the mall. Now, here you are. We are all.
Now I gotta pay you back. You're getting so old. I need to be picking you up and taking you to the mall too.
Exactly. So let's talk about your childhood. All right. So you were born in Rwanda, and then when you were still, a toddler, we leave the country. We go to Congo, and then we end up in Kenya eventually. Do you have any recollection of that? Do you have any memories of that?
I do have one of my first memories. I think mom said we were in Tanzania. I was actually, one of my first memories was mom butchering a chicken. And I was the same level as the table and looking up at her butchering this chicken. And my very first thought I ever had was, man, I cannot wait to grow up so I can do this one day. I did not become a professional butcher, but but that was one of my first memories. And then I do have memories in Kenya with my siblings, of course, about my parents. I didn't know that we were poor. I thought that's how everybody lived.
Right.
I just remember being very observant, and I remember my siblings always being there. I remember my dad being gone and coming back. I remember my mom being sick sometimes, but I don't really remember the details of that very well. And then I remember a lot about us coming to the United States and that journey and all of that.
Yeah. Let's stay back in Africa for a moment. I almost forgot that you guys went to Tanzania. The other kids, we didn't go. Just for people who are listening, I am the firstborn of 8 children. But in Kenya,
thank you for your service.
So at a certain point, things got tough, and we had to split our family. So myself and the other older siblings, we had to stay in Kenya, and my dad and my mom and the younger siblings, including ALBINE, they had to go to Tanzania to see if they could make life over there. But eventually, it didn't work out, and they ended up coming back to Kenya, where we live.
Who did you guys stay with? I didn't even know this.
Actually, we stayed with our grandma and our uncles, and then they went to the United States. We had to move to another family. Another family had to take care of us while we were waiting for you guys to come back to Kenya. So that's what happened. Do you have any recollection on how you guys left Tanzania to come back to Kenya?
I have no idea.
Yeah, refugees were being forcibly repatriated back to Rwanda. And so you guys had to come back to Kenya. And although things were bad, they could have been worse.
Right. Wow, right. That is so interesting. I had no idea.
Let's now talk about leaving Kenya to the United States of America. Tell me if you remember anything about that and how that went.
Like the actual physical trip?
Like from your perspective, what was that all about? Like how did you take that in?
I knew we were going to America, And I remember how romanticized America was, man. I thought we were literally going to heaven. So we were gonna go to heaven where the people are white. I don't even really know what that means, but then everyone wears white clothes, and we're gonna be in like a cloud-like atmosphere. You know, this is the projection of an 8-year-old mind trying to take it and understand what everyone else is talking about, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, I remember actually leaving, and there was a guy sitting in front of his porch, and he was saying "Toka hapo," and saying we don't want Rwandans here anyway. And you could tell that it was like based off of some like
Xenophobia.
I wouldn't even say xenophobia, but like almost like heartbreaking, like jealousy.
Jealousy. Okay.
He was getting, and that's how I perceived it even at the time. I could tell what he was saying. I could tell this guy is projecting a lot of anger, but he's actually really jealous. He wants to come too, and he doesn't get to come, and he has to stay here, you know, sitting in front of this like apartment that's run down and in this environment, and he wants to go to heaven too, and he doesn't get to.
You know, we were living in a place called Kayole. It was a pretty in modern standard, it's considered to be a slum, although Kenya has worse, much worse slums. Kayole was not that bad. I always marvel at how back home we have not been able to create those opportunities for our people so that when somebody leaves that place to go abroad, what I'm trying to say is we should be able somehow to create those conditions of peace, prosperity, opportunity back home so that people who want to...
So then it's just a trip abroad. It's not an escape. Yeah. I totally get that, and I totally agree. And it's really hard to conceptualize why that is. And there's a lot of reasons. You know, I reflect on like Patrice Lumumba, and you know, whenever we have leaders who are ready and the people want that,
right.
It seems like there are so many powers that don't want that. You know, it's not a lack of will from the people. It's not a lack of will from, you know, the people who've left those places. So for an immigrant like me, that is a very disheartening place to be, because you want to help and you want the improvements and you want the changes, but it's like, dang, and then what? Get caught up in this entire cycle where the inevitable occurs yet again. So yeah, I mean, you just look at that problem as one immigrant, and it's very easy to feel hopeless and helpless about it.
You are now in America. What were your first impressions?
Arriving at the airport, I remember two things. One of them was our Uncle Nsenga coming and holding my hand and walking away with me. And I felt like this immediate affinity for him that I continue to have. The second thing was seeing my first obese person and being terrified out of my mind, because I'd never seen anything like that before. So, you know, with time, I remember integrating into the school system here.
There's one thing that I always remember when I think about you is there's one time I was having not an easy relationship with Dad. And then I remember one day you came to me and you were like, you know what? This is how you should talk to Dad. Instead of saying this, you should be saying that. Because when somebody says like this, it gets perceived this way. You were like coaching me in how I should talk to Dad, the things that I should say, the things that I should not say. And at that time, you were still in middle school. You were so young when we were saying you will be a psychologist.
That is so funny. I don't remember that at all. I think I saw a lot. And so one thing about me is I'm definitely an empathetic person. When other people are in pain, I feel that. Like I feel it myself. It's very intense, actually.
Wow.
And so in a self-serving way, I want peace. And so I would have a sense of why there's these miscommunications, because I'm sensitive to different people's emotions and how they're responding to their interactions.
Right.
But then it would always kind of boggle me that other people are not aware of the same thing or don't have that same perception. And so it's like, well, let me share this because maybe then they'll see what I see and then they'll have a better emotional time. And then once I feel them relax, then I'll feel more relaxed. And then, I won't have stomach aches and all of this anxiety from, the tension that I'm surrounded by.
We knew that you were going to be a psychologist. When did you know that you actually wanted to be a psychologist?
When I was younger, I thought I was gonna be a medical doctor because I knew I liked helping people. Okay. And then I volunteered at hospitals and I saw somebody with a tumor that was larger than me. And I said, no, this is not what I'm meant to do. And this is not what I'm meant to be. I opened that door. I saw that. I closed the door on my medical career. But then I ended up taking a psychology class in high school. And I was infatuated and mesmerized. And then I had a classmate whose mother was a psychologist. And I asked that classmate for her mother's phone number. And so as a high school student, I would be calling the psychologist, asking her what I need to do and what she did and how I could do it. And fast forward, I ended up going to that psychologist program. She ended up actually being my advisor and my dissertation chair. So when I got my doctorate degree, she actually gave me the stole. So that was from age 15, 16 to age 26.
Wow.
I only graduated, so that was like a 10-year process. And she was there the entire time. It was like a really beautiful, like closed circle moment.
One thing that for sure I didn't have that you had was a discipline. I had before me really everything that I need. The school was there, financial aid was there, role models were there. I had teachers who were ready to support me, but I was just very, very much into partying, and it took me some time to really get my act together and be like, okay, now let me do what I have to do. But people like you, like people who end up becoming like doctors in psychology or medical doctors, you have to delay the gratification. You have to delay the partying and the joy and the fun, and you just have to spend those hours in the books. So how was that for you? Like, where did you, what was that motivation to just stay put, stay focused?
I want you to maybe give yourself a little more credit because I and my younger siblings could always benefit from the experiences of our older siblings. Right. And you particularly, as the oldest, could not benefit in that same way. And I think you were working through things in your own way, like going in uncharted territory for the first time. Like, I mean, you have to appreciate from like a psychological and social perspective what you were going through at a really intense developmental stage. Like even people who are not, ex-immigrants trying to process being transplanted, having an astounding amount of freedom that they never ever had before, and having a history of trauma from the age of 10 to then, like you were, and then trying to do that all as like a freshman in college. So I was actually, one of my practicum sites was a college. So I was working with a lot of freshmen and hearing the problems that they have. And there's just a lot of like transitional issues, like moving out of mom and dad's house, like identity, who am I, where am I going? Like, all these things. And I'm trying to imagine you with the history you're coming in with the familial issues that you're coming with, and then the expectation that you're going to like engage with that gracefully, I think is a little funny. Like, like, oh goodness, I should have been so disciplined as an 18-year-old refugee in a completely new, like, so in terms of me, like discipline or something like that, I don't know. I honestly don't give myself that much credit. Like So this is how I conceptualize things, you know. I believe that people intrinsically are growth oriented, right, and want to achieve the highest versions of themselves. I think they just need the right foundations and the right kind of like soil, right? So if you have like the right soil and fertilization and you plant a seed, you don't have to keep watching that plant and thinking, oh, it's gonna happen, whatever. No, it has that right fertilization, and a plant wants to grow towards the sun, and so it will, right? As long as you make sure you know it's watered, the fertilization is good. For me, I think my fertilization was like my family first and foremost. I really think that I needed you guys to, you know, be my supports and stuff like that. I had a child at a young age as well, my oldest. And in a funny way, I think what I also needed in my personal fertilizing pot was some space, right? I think having immigrant parents, it's like kind of having somebody on you all the time. And, you know, too much of anything, even a good thing, it kind of breeds opposite results, right? That's why you kind of have strict kids, go to college, they go crazy, whatever. This is their first time with freedom. I actually got a lot of that freedom at age 16. Everyone had kind of given up on me. So I really was able to think for myself, to think for like, what do I want for my future? And I just had the support mostly from my mom and my siblings during that time. So I had the support, I had mentors, and then finally I had the space to just do me, because at that point, no one had any expectations for me, perhaps, right? Except for that I take care of this child. Okay. And so because of that, I was able to kind of do my own thing and become my own person, because now it's not suddenly who I want to be is not like, oh, I want to be the person who's going to make dad proud. That was off the table. All right. I was free from having to do anything for anyone else except for myself. And that's kind of a liberating place, because then you just get to figure out who you are.
These are some of the benefits of not being the first or the second born, because all the expectations are on you.
Yeah.
But that's you guys, you kind of like hide under the radar and just do whatever you want. And then
and by the time it's our turn, right. By the time it's our turn, like our parents are old, they're tired. You got to wore them down. Like, that's why I say thank you for your service. I do think I benefited a lot from, you know, having older siblings and being a very watchful person, and, you know, being able to be like, I don't want to go through that, so I'm probably not, you know?
Yeah, and to be honest, every time when I think about like our parents having like immigrant, like first generation immigrant parents, they always go through a lot. Like when I look back, especially like mom and dad, they went through their own different struggles.
I also appreciate like what mom and dad were trying to do. I think and a lot of time immigrant parents, they're, especially coming from conflictual situations and stuff like that, processing their own traumas, control is really huge. They feel like, if I want to save my kids, and for them, it probably does feel life and death, because for a lot of times everything was life and death. I need to have the maximum amount of control. Now, once you're not in a life and death situation, but you're treating control as if it is life and death, you know, to a teenager or something like that. And a teenager, the natural desire is to gain independence, because adulthood is right around the corner. It's very natural to want your independence. So those two variables together are just, I mean, that's very volatile.
Volatile on both sides. The teenager is a fire just getting, like, waiting for being kindled. And the parents, they're just still processing this intense feeling.
I almost have the question where I wish I could ask dad, like, when did you begin to feel safe? When did you begin to feel like your kids are safe? Because when you're operating from survival, fight or flight, the way you parent is going to look a lot different from the way you parent once you're finally at peace and you recognize that you're at peace.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I don't know if mom and dad ever have felt like that ever since the war and stuff like that. It almost makes me want to ask you the same thing. Do you feel like you're in survival mode, or when did it hit you that you're finally
It's interesting because I never felt like I was surviving. Even when we were in Kenya, again, because I was involved in the Boy Scouts, and that was like my life with friends, where we could go out and laugh and have fun. And that became like my go-to place. And then the next thing about me, I was very much into reading. Reading took me places. Like I was everywhere. I was in New York, I was in Paris, I was in Hong Kong. My books were taking me everywhere. And that was my way.
you know that that's a coping skill?
I didn't know that I was coping, but because again, remember at home, mom would be terribly, terribly sick. And all the doctors had given up on her basically. And I would just come home and feel like I was entering into like a hair zone because it was just so painful to see mom. And I would just look at all of us. Oftentimes, my dad would be away trying to make some money. And I would just go to my novels. I would just go to my books. I would just disappear.
That's overwhelming. So a lot of times, I used to do the same thing, but instead of reading, I would just lay in bed and I would make stories in my mind. It's called dissociation.
Yes.
And it's actually a form of coping for young people in particular who don't have a lot of power in their situations. So I can't physically remove from the thing that's causing me pain. So I'll mentally remove myself. And I remember it actually got to a point where I was dissociating so often that it started to become automatic and I couldn't control it as much. And I realized if I don't stop doing this, like voluntarily, it's going to get harder and harder for me to actually be present. And so there are actual dissociative disorders for people who have mostly developmental traumas. And what ends up happening is sometimes they just lose track of time. And they don't even know, like, when did I get from here to there? When, like, as soon as your brain senses stress, it just does the thing that you've been training it to do. And so then it just leaves.
Yeah, it's like, okay, if the present is messed up, why should I live here? Well, I can live there.
I
and just
go somewhere
there.
else
Yes.
right away, very quickly. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I was actually around 13 years old when I realized, oh my gosh, this is starting to happen all the time by itself. ALBINE, you have to be here. You have to stay here. You can't leave anymore. I remember telling myself that. And then that's when I finally started to be more mindful about attending to reality.
Wow.
When you try to interview a psychologist, sorry.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I'm ending up learning a lot of things about myself that, especially when you just said that. What is it again? Dissociative disorder?
There's the extreme of that is called dissociative identity disorder, but you can just look into dissociation, especially in childhood. Like most of my clients are people who are like sexually assaulted through childhood. So, or even like war-torn areas, or there was a lot of physical abuse in the home. A child has no ability to leave or control. So whenever they get victimized, they literally just leave mentally, because that's the only power a child has is their own imagination.
How long did it take you to finish to get your bachelor's degree?
I did it in about 3 years.
About 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in other words, you took a 4-year degree in 3 years. Kudos.
Yeah. Because I'm a sprinter. I'm not a marathoner. I knew I was doing something hard, and I knew I had a doctorate degree as the end sight. So for as much as I could limit the time I spent in something like undergrad, that's what I was trying to do.
And then you went straight into was master's and PhD program
combined.
Combined. And that took you how long?
So that program is a 5-year program. Obviously, like you can take more time if you need it, but the plan was to complete in 5 years.
Which you did?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that, you still have to go through like a residency program because they can't just throw patients at you?
No. So I had to go through an internship year and pass my like examinations and stuff like that. And so I actually was just licensed as an independently licensed psychologist last year, the end of last year.
Do you foresee any schooling still ahead of you, or you are like tired with the whole thing?
I looked at my husband the other day and I told him I miss school, and he said no. No, but really, he was just like, what do you miss about it? And I think what I miss is just the atmosphere of continuous learning and being able to ask questions, and it's okay, and everyone is just, that community of learning is just amazing. Right now, I do have a full-time job. I am looking into beginning my own consultation business. And I got my first consultation gig that I'm working on right now.
How is that going?
So it's good. So one of the things that I'm gonna be doing is talking to people about trauma. So I'm actually gonna speak at the Rwandan Youth Summit about like trauma and displacement. Actually, this thing we're talking about dissociation, I wonder how many refugee kids experience that. I think I might actually need to use that. And then I'm helping somebody create like a technical manual. It's actually a hairstylist who works with kids with disabilities and stuff like that. And so she's discovered a lot of ways in terms of how to, a person with autism, to have a lot of sensory issues. They're very sensitive. And so she finds ways to do something as simple as a haircut. But something that simple is usually out of reach for parents with children with disabilities and stuff. So she wants to create a manual for other hairstylists working with people with disabilities. But she doesn't have that technical background. How do you do that research? How do you put together a manual? And that was actually my dissertation. It was creating a curriculum. So I'm going to be working with her on that.
Yeah. So let me take you back to school for a moment. As you were progressing in your doctorate degree, what were some of your memorable moments and some challenging moments?
So I think a memorable moment was finishing my dissertation and successfully defending it.
And that's a lot of stress. Like that's really a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. I was working on it throughout the course of my graduate school program. It ended up being like 150 pages, and it included like a technical manual that I had written. I never thought I could write that much, So it was just a lot that I put into it, and being able to be in front of my colleagues, including Dr. Warfield, who I mentioned,
yes.
And be able to defend that and get grilled, but then be able to succeed was really good for me. In terms of challenges, I think it helped me actually address a lot of things that I still needed to work on. Like having crippling perfectionism, like having a lot of anxiety about like what's to do next, blah, 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 all of that.
Right.
You said this, the purpose of this was to be inspirational.
Right.
I think, it's great to have goals. It's great to have a place that you're going, but it's really important to take the time to appreciate where you are. And I spent a lot of time just checking off boxes, trying to get somewhere. Unfortunately, if I had like died in the process, I don't think I would have like ever have really lived, because I was so goal oriented that the process was lost on me. And so it was during the course of graduate school that I started to work on being more mindful, being more present, being a little bit easier on myself, rather than looking at my challenges as personal failures or evidence of my personal failures. Being able to have some compassion for my humanity and be willing to ask for help and see that that's actually a part of the journey. A part of the journey is, failing. Failing is a critical part of the journey because that's how you get to know yourself. That's how you get to learn about what you need help with. Sometimes your failures actually become your greatest strengths because it's the things that you work on the most, right? And that can be really exciting. Oriented.
Did you just say, because I want people to hear this, did you just say failing can be exciting?
It is very exciting. Imagine if everything you do, you just get right the very first time. What is the point? What is the point? Every single scientific discovery we know has been the result of multiple failed experiments, and the person going back to the lab and trying to figure this out, going back to if that experiment the very first time that scientist had a failing, like, oh crap, I guess I'm just a horrible scientist, I guess I'm just a piece of shit, I guess I'm just worthless, and they just gave up, I venture to say the vast majority of the things we enjoy today would not exist.
So that is really something to keep in mind. When you fall, doesn't mean you belong to the ground. You just get up and just keep fighting.
Yeah, and sometimes you fall, you gotta take a moment, you gotta breathe, because that hurt. And sometimes the best you can do the next day is crawl, and then after that, the best you can do is walk, and then maybe after that you can run, and then maybe the day after that you need to go back to crawling. But it's okay to know that you're still moving forward, and that's okay. And there's a lot to be learned on the ground, right? Suffering is important for us as human beings because it's the great equalizer. It helps us tap into our shared humanity, right? And so the next time, even when you're encountered with somebody who's struggling, you're more likely to have more patience with them because you realize, hey, there was a time where I did not know what I know today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, it's okay. It's okay to go through something. It's okay to cry. It's okay.
Yes.
It's okay to drop the ball.
Yes. You can sum it up as it is okay to be human. Yeah. And as immigrants, we are often told and conditioned to be perfect, to be superhuman, and anything less than just feels so inadequate, right? But that's a setup, because at the end of the day, you're only human.
Don't you think that it's possible to take that concept to another extreme and say, I'm fine the way I am, and then maybe use that as a crutch, not to push yourself and not to move forward? Isn't that possible?
So this is what I will say. I think most of the people who ask me that, not to put you on blast,
Yeah.
That's often an anxiety-based fear.
Really?
That's often an anxiety-based fear that I actually need my anxiety. I need this level of stress. I need this kind of self-deprecating relationship I have with myself because that's the only thing that pushes me to do better and to be better. Right? And if I let it go, if I let go of my anxiety, if I actually allow myself to be at peace, my fear is that I'm going to fall and I'm going to fail and I'm going to, like maybe I hate anxiety because I'm constantly stressed and it makes me irritable and it makes me impatient and short with my kids and with my spouse and I have horrible sleep. Yes, all these horrible things, but my anxiety is also my whipping master. And I'm afraid if I let it go, like I'm going to be nothing. The other perspective, which is maybe more spirituality based and maybe your audience is more religious based, right? Where there's an understanding that fundamentally, like, who we are at our core is beautiful, it's love, it's a reflection of God, right? And if that's who we are, and if we allow ourselves to sit in that knowing, perhaps we can do better and reach even further than we can from a place of like self-hate and fear.
It's like you are moving forward because you are attracted by the light in front of you, not because you are afraid of the darkness behind you.
Exactly. And do you want to be light oriented or do you want to be darkness? Like
it's like what it's like, yeah, what is your center? Are you like light centric or darkness centric? Because both people may end up in the same direction, but with totally different motivations. And
the person who's like driven by that anxiety, by that fear, by that self-hate, once they get there, trust me, they're not even going to be happy.
Yeah.
they're not going to be happy. What anxiety often does to people who are perfectionists, and what I actually learned in graduate school, is you end up tying your happiness and your self-worth to these extrinsic goals.
Yeah.
And then once you reach that, there's an anticlimactic feel to it, because I still don't really like myself. I still really don't feel like I'm good enough. And so then you build another goal. And then you do, and you know what? You can do that for the rest of your freaking life until you die. Right? But what about if, yes, I do have these things that I love to do. I love to be a psychologist. I love to learn more about the human mind. And what if I'm doing those things out of a sense of passion and out of a sense of love? And what if throughout that entire process, I'm kind to myself and I like myself? Like, doesn't that just sound so much more fun?
Wow. Exactly. So here I have, you know what, we can speak until all the cows come home.
Right.
But so let me ask you now, what aspect of your job right now
Mhm.
that you are enjoying?
You know, in terms of my favorite part of my job, I would say it's the recovery process. I am a trauma psychologist, and I work a lot with like combat veterans, people who experience sexual assault in the military, but then also like developmental trauma. Um, so, you know, when you say that, that does sound like very disheartening. But I don't think I would do this job if it was just like you just hear these horrible stories and then that's it, right? The reason I really love my job is because I walk with people through their recovery journeys, and recovery is a lifelong process.
Awesome. That's awesome. I have two more questions for you, then I will let you go. You went back to Africa. That was in which year was that?
2013.
Having been away from Africa for 2 decades, now you went back. What were your perceptions? That it's a two-part question. And do you ever see yourself doing something in Africa? I mean, the work that you're doing here, there are many people who would benefit from your service. Do you have that passion or that desire of doing something back home?
So my perception of Africa was generally positive, of Rwanda was generally positive, because it was based on, you know, the climate, the food, and the people. And, you know, my family has lived there for hundreds of thousands of years. So evolutionarily, you know, this is the place where this is my natural habitat. My skin was glowing, my hair was shining. I was eating the food. There was no GI problems. I was like, oh man, it's like putting a polar bear in the Arctic. Like things are moving, you know. And when you're used to living in this low vitamin D, no sunlight, cold snow environments, right, you don't realize, like, oh my gosh, like some of my suffering was because I'm living in a place where I was not actually, you know, biologically meant to be. So just off of like a very pure biology standpoint, it was amazing. From a social standpoint, you know, it was great to meet my cousins. It was a little bit hard to see how much they romanticized me in America, even though I remember my own experiences, because, you know, I'm just like them. We're all one, we're all the same. And it made me feel bad about the self-confidence that Africans have, that they would see somebody who is closer to the Eurocentric standard, whether that's in appearance or where they live or whatever, and romanticize that and see that person as having some higher status than them. Like, I know that's the way the world
yes
makes things, but it really isn't true. Foundationally, we're all human beings. We're all like worthy, and so that made me sad. Do I see myself going back one day? Work, you know, with this consultation business that I'm starting, I'm just planting seeds for now, and I'm gonna allow it to go where it takes me. I always had aspirations for working with like a non-NGO or something like that. One of the things that made me like trauma psychologists is this book, Memoirs of a Child Soldier. And I just thought about starting like a trauma clinic in a place like Sierra Leone where those child soldiers were, and helping people like have, you know, recovery and on all of that, and those conflict related areas. And right now I'm getting a lot of experience with military and war related trauma. So all of that would be helpful in that endeavor. But I've come to find that like our imaginations for ourselves and our future trajectories is very limited in comparison to what, like, say, God's imagination for our future is. Yeah. So my work is to just plant seeds and to put one foot in front of the other. And, you know, I'll end up where I need to be. And I'm just going to have that, like, that trust right now.
All right. One last question. What would you tell yourself, knowing what you know now, maybe 10 or 20 years ago? Or what would you tell someone who is trying to push to move forward?
Well, 20 years ago, I was 8. So I don't know what I would say to an 8-year-old me, but maybe like a 16-year-old me or something like that.
Yeah.
I would say continue to trust yourself, continue to ask questions, and continue to pursue like the highest and truest version of yourself. You won't be disappointed. You know, it might not always be easy, but you won't be disappointed by the outcome.
ALBINE, Dr. BIZIMANA, thank you very much.